With new McValue at McDonald's, you'll get more than you expect for breakfast. Like buy a sausage burrito and add a sausage McMuffin for $1. Because a late night double shift deserves an early morning deal. Get more than you expect with new McValue.
Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the
it.
writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing is
so some readers love that, and some readers are like, "But I wanted more of this." So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by a commercial fiction writer and one of the winners of Comedy Women in Print 2020. It's Faye Brann. Hello.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. Let's jump right in and talk about your latest publication, your second novel, Kiss, Marry, Murder, which is out right now. Tell us a little bit about it and what we can expect from the book.
Well, it is the first in a series, the Jessica Sinclair series, and the story opens with a TV reality show host, Jessica Sinclair, whose TV show, I Know Where You Live, has fallen on hard times, and she receives a death threat and decides that it is not worth her time or energy to be doing this program anymore, and she walks away from it. And then we find her 6 months later, and in order to make some money, her agent has suggested that she becomes a private detective and a private investigator and writes a book about it. And so she starts up her investigations agency and decides she needs a little bit of help. And she decides to get in contact with an old friend of hers, a frenemy, Marianne, and she goes to visit her at her house and discovers that she has been murdered. And Jessica is therefore accused of the murder and has to exonerate herself and also find the murderer. So that is the setup, the premise of the book.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's really cool. A pretty unique setup. But it is a comedy. There is a humorous story, even though that sounded quite serious.
Yeah, it's. I mean, obviously, murder is a serious business,
yes.
But no, this is definitely a crime caper, and I really enjoy sort of having that mystery element, the murder mystery element, and I think it really lends itself to using humour within the book as well. So I like to think there's not too many, slapstick clowning moments in it, but
yes.
There's certainly characters that bring the light as well as the shade, and that's important to me, that there's that balance in these books.
Yes, absolutely. And this is your second novel. Your first novel also a comedy, but your first novel was a standalone novel. What this one's the first in a series. What made you want to start up a series?
Well, I mean, Tinker Tailor School Mum Spy was my first novel, and that was the one that won the unpublished Comedy Women in Print prize, and it was always left open actually for a second one in the series. Just unfortunately hasn't been picked up for it.
Okay.
But it's something that I definitely would love to go back to and revisit the characters that I created for that as well. I think there's something quite nice about writing a series of books. I think you just get to, like, as a writer, you get to know your characters really well, and you know that there's somewhere that you can take them after that first book. And I think for readers as well, like, I mean, as a reader, I love a good series that I can really get under the skin of and enjoy that character development and story development over the period of time, and also to a certain extent the writer development as well, because I think for every book that you write, you become a better writer. And so quite often, if I'm reading a series of books, I can see it's getting better each time.
Okay.
And that's a really joyful thing. So Kiss, Marry, Murder, yes, this one is with the intention of having a series, and it's part of the reason why I decided to self-publish this one versus traditionally publish, just so that I had the freedom to be able to create the series and not be reliant too much on a big publisher to take me up on it. So I'm what you call a hybrid author. I search for traditional book deals, but I also am self-publishing as well.
Okay. Yeah. So that obviously gives you the freedom to then say that this is part one of a series that will exist, because obviously you have total control of that. Well, that's very cool.
Because I want to, yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because you can. No one can stop you.
Exactly.
I was just flicking through about both of your novels. Am I right in thinking that both of them are set in the sort of suburbs?
Yes, they're both set in southwest London, which is where I've spent a lot of my adult life, not all of it.
Okay, right.
But I get quite inspired by being around here. And there's something also quite nice, I think, about writing where in
definitely.
terms of, especially with crime, there's so much detail has to go into what you're writing and where you're writing, because it can become important somewhere down the line. And so for me to have a really clear idea of, like, I'm thinking about this particular street when I'm writing, and I know it well, and it's also easily visitable if I need to go and check something out about it. I quite like writing with that local feel to it. And the other thing is, if characters have to move from one place to the other, for me it's a fast track, because I know they'll just get on the tube, or I know that they'll get a bus, or you know, so it just makes life a bit easier in that sense, rather than constantly crushing over, did I get this right? But I think whenever I'm writing location, I mean, I take little pieces of southwest London and names of places. But for example, in Kiss, Marry, Murder, Penny Hill Lane, where the murder takes place, is a fictional street. It doesn't actually exist. There is a street that sort of exists like it in the vicinity of Barnes in southwest London. I think cozy murder mysteries in villages in the Cotswolds or wherever have kind of, there's a lot of them around, let's put it that way. So I just wanted to bring my stories into a slightly more urban setting. I mean, it is still suburban, but there are some urban elements to it. And I just quite like the idea of doing that as somewhere different, where there aren't quite so many vicars and people on bicycles.
Yeah. I mean, it's like reality with slightly blurred edges.
Yeah.
That's good.
Which is basically southwest London in a nutshell, I think.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like a midsummer murders. I don't know why people choose to live there. Someone gets murdered every other month.
Well, it was quite funny when I did my book launch, because some of the stories set in Barnes in southwest London, and my book launch was actually at Barnes Bookshop. And while we were setting up for the book launch, an older gentleman came in and sort of had a poke round and saw the book on the tables and things. And he said, just tell me it's not set in Barnes. He said, there's people being murdered in Barnes all over the place at the moment.
Oh, no.
And I was like, yes, sorry, that's why I'm here. I think that slightly villagey feel, the gossipy, the everything looks sweet and twee on the outside, but there's other things bubbling along underneath, is a rich vein for authors to mine. Yes,
absolutely. And full of interesting and unusual characters.
Yeah, I think so. But equally for me, like I'm a London girl, so I like putting it on the edges of London if I can.
yeah, perfect. And when we mentioned the debut, Tinker Tailor Schoolmum Spy, which you did win Unpublished Comedy Woman of the Year 2020. I had another winner from Comedy Women in Print. Sylvia Saunders was on a while ago, and I asked her when she was writing her novel Homesick, did she think she was writing a comedy? And she said not at all. So I'd love to know, when you were writing, not Kiss, Marry, Murder, the first one, Tinker Tailor Schoolmum Spy, were you consciously writing a comedy, or did it become that later on?
I think writing comedy, oh my gosh, when you watch comedy, it's really subjective. And I think almost a similar thing happens when you're writing it as well. I think if you try to be funny, you will never really be funny. You might throw an odd gag in here or there, but when you're writing comedy, it's just about really reflecting true life situations with a slightly skewed lens. And that's, to me, what I think people find amusing or witty in writing. I did a lot of improvisational comedy on stage for a number of years, and I learned a lot about what gets audiences going and how to fail joyfully, and also how to read what lands, what's funny versus what isn't. And time again, if you come on stage and you try to be funny, you will not really get the laughs that you were expecting. If you come on stage and be truthful, people laugh with recognition or in anticipation of something happening. And so I learned a lot from doing my stage work and translated it into the writing. So I think when I started off with Tinker Tailor, I always knew I was going to write a commercial book, and it wasn't going to be, a Ken Follett thriller. But in terms of setting out to be funny, I think the answer would be no, because I think being truthful, reflecting that truth and creating joy within the pages of what you're writing is probably the thing I set out to do. And for me, as long as I'm enjoying writing it, it's up to the person reading it how funny or not they find it. But I just hope that they see the joy that I got in penning it coming through. Okay. That's the most important thing for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you're right about if you see or read or experience comedy and it's like they're trying too hard to be funny, it detracts from it, the reality of it being funny.
It turns you off a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
And I just think, as I say, if you try and be funny, you kind of normally end up gagging, and gags, fall flat quite a lot of the time, unless they're genuinely spontaneous. They're really, and it's quite difficult to be genuinely spontaneous in a book.
Yes.
So
after all the drafts.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, for me, it's actually interesting. I go through or have an editor go through, and quite often if I've been too try hard or too gaggy, people pick up on it and they say, take this gag out, or this doesn't sit comfortably with a character, or this is not something that they would say. And you can see where those gags are, and they just don't belong. For me anyway, they don't belong in my writing. It's all about witty dialogue and callbacks and a little bit of physical comedy as well thrown in, but nothing too obvious.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think with comedy, because I watch stand-up every now and again, and something that you always notice is, and like you were saying, comedians will always work towards a joke. They won't immediately come in and try and make you laugh straight away. I mean, just by the fact that every big comedian will have a warm-up act before they come on, because they want the audience primed and ready to laugh before they have to do anything. And you mentioned callbacks. I think having done some kind of course in comedy and working with comedy, I'm sure you understand the level of comedy which is to do with laying a lot of groundwork before you actually make the joke, which you can do really, really nicely in prose, I guess. Yeah.
And I think the anticipation of your reader, your audience, whatever medium that you're working in, that's where they get their joy from, is having their anticipation satisfied. And also, another thing I learned from improv, actually, thinking about it, was when we talk about gags on stage, a gag is the end. It's the end of a scene. There's nowhere to go after it. It's done.
Yeah.
And so if you translate that to page as well, the last thing you actually want to happen is, unless you really are at the end of the story, is for the scene to just end, or to have no, it sort of has no meaning at that point in time. So if you just gag and that's it, that's finished, where'd you go from there? It's kind of blackout. And so for writing, it to me, it doesn't work either.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a fascinating topic. I do quite a lot of workshops actually on witty writing and using all of that toolkit that I have acquired on stage and how I use that and translate that to page. So, I mean, I could talk about it for literally hours.
Because you have, and you still run workshops on that?
Yeah, I do. It was something I started developing actually when I first did Tinker Tailor, and that first came out, and I did some very sort of early versions of the workshop. But the more I think about it, and the more I talk about it with people like you, and run the workshops and things, the more relevant it becomes. And I think, people genuinely, even if they're not writing what you would perceive as comedy novels, there's always room for wit. And a bit of lightness in manuscripts, I think. Really doesn't matter what your genre is. You need that balance. And so, I do get a lot of questions from people saying, well, how do I put wit into my writing? Or, so I try, and this course or the workshop is now tailored to sort of try and allow people to see how wit can appear in writing, even if you're not writing a funny book. And I learn from writers as much as I learn from myself or my experiences as I go along. So yeah, it's something I'm really interested in and love. It's almost a study of mine, my geeky study on this.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I was literally talking to somebody the other day, and I hadn't heard about this, but they said apparently Jimmy Carr is actively trying to get writing comedy into like school curriculum.
I mean, I think there is something, you can learn so much from writing comedy about yourself. And again, with improv is all about failure, joy of failure, because 9 times out of 10, when you go on stage and don't know what you're going to say, it's probably not going to go exactly as you thought it might, or exactly as the audience thought it might. But you have to just learn to come off stage and say, like, well, that didn't work, let's do something new, or let's try again, or whatever, and not crush yourself or think about it too hard. And I can imagine stand-up comedy is quite similar to that in terms, well, it's probably even worse, because if you bomb with stand-up comedy, it's worse because you've written it and rehearsed it and planned it, which is why I would never do stand-up. I much prefer taking the gamble and at least having one success out of every 10. But yeah, I can see why he would think it's important, because I think, learning how to fail, learning that about yourself is a wonderful thing to learn from when you're young, because it's really hard to learn it when you're older. You do not accept failure very easily at all. And I think failure is an important part of comedy and of writing and of any creative endeavour, because you're not going to be successful all of the time in terms of creative endeavour, because you never know who's looking at it, reading it, experiencing it, and what they might think of it. They determine your success or not. So I think it would be a brilliant idea. I'm at this particular workshop. I'm actually teaching some sixth formers this month, and it will be the first time that I've taught young people rather than adult writers. And I'm actually really looking forward to seeing what they make of it and how they respond.
有了 McDonald's 全新 McValue， 让早餐超乎期待，享受更多。上买一份 sausage burrito 多付1元，可得一份 sausage McMuffin。因为深夜连上2轮班，值得利用清晨優惠犒賞自己。全新 McValue 讓你超乎期待，享受更多。
Respond to it, just because it will inform me having younger minds. See how quickly they adapt, or what they think of the particular issues behind it. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and I guess the differences in what they find funny, even if it's not necessarily the content, but the way it's delivered versus what other generations find funny.
Yeah, I mean, I've given a few talks to teenagers. They are really intimidating as an audience, so I'm not going to lie. I think the last one I did was to like 200 15-year-olds, and that was a tough gig. Oh, that was a really tough gig, because they only really find themselves amusing, certainly not a 50-year-old woman. So yeah, that's again, you learn a lot about yourself by standing in front of a room of people, whoever they are, and I think all of these things inform the writing. I mean, my books are specifically aimed not at younger people. The protagonists in my books are middle-aged ladies, and not that they're bashing the menopause stick over anybody's head by any means. They are, but the point is that they are about women who have experience and a certain degree of knowledge behind them, but also are human and can make mistakes and fail. And I think the idea of writing those characters at that particular age is because they're grossly underrepresented by literature, given the number of women of that age that actually read the books. But also, I just feel it's important to allow those characters some space and some air. I drifted off into a different conversation.
That's great.
But you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Before we head over to the desert island, I'd love to chat a little bit about your publishing journey. So your debut came out in 2020, and am I right in thinking that you were partnered with your agent, Davinia Andrew Lynch, when that kind of deal went through? I'd love to hear about how you found your agent and like kind of the journey to find your agent.
So I had I would say it's probably not a standard experience, but that doesn't make it any less interesting in a way, because the standard experience can be a pretty hard road to follow. Yeah. I started writing Tinker Tailor in, I think, 2017, I'm going to say. I can't really remember. And when I thought it was finished and ready, which obviously it wasn't. It was another about 13 editions of it before it got to print. But when I thought it was ready, I decided to go out exactly the same as everybody else does, send my letters, my emails out to various agents and things. And I had a little bit of interest, but not an awful lot. And I actually signed up for an agent one-to-one speed pitching session at the London Book Fair in 2018. I think it was 2018. 2019, sorry. And that is where I met Davinia. And she was running late. And so all of her timings were messed up. And I only had like 5 minutes to pitch my book instead of the 10 minutes. So I was feeling a little bit hard done by. But anyway, I was like, I've got to go for this. But for the second that we sat down opposite each other, we just got on really well. And she was really excited by the pitch that I did, and asked me to send her the full manuscript, and then got me to make a few edits, etc., and to see how I responded to feedback. And then I think about 6 weeks, 2 months later, she signed me. And in and amongst that time, I'd entered the 2019 Comedy Women in Print Prize, and gotten nowhere. And after I got signed with Davinia, she said, okay, we need to make some changes to this book. We need to edit. It shouldn't, it starts in chapter 4. So we need to move the start of the book to the actual beginning, and lots of other things. So we made some quite significant changes. We changed the title, like lots of other things. And in 2020, I got an email from Comedy Women in Print to say, if you've significantly reworked your manuscript, you can re-enter. So I did, because I had. And then lockdown happened. And so I discovered that I'd been longlisted, shortlisted, and that I'd won all during lockdowns.
Okay.
So I didn't actually meet my editor until my book launch in 2021. It was really quite a hard period, not as hard as the people that had a book out during COVID, but my book came out just after all the lockdowns finished. It was one of the first events, I think, where anybody had been in a room with more than 6 people. So it was it was really exciting. It was a fabulous launch because everyone was so excited to be out. And so that was my prize for the Comedy Women in Print, was my book deal with HarperCollins, a 1-book deal. And and so that was my prize, and so I was published in 2021. And then because it had been lockdown, I'd written another book, but I wrote it about 3 times in lockdown, and I just never got to the end of it. And it was the original difficult second album. I really struggled with it. And once Tinker Tailor had been published, I tried to go back to it again, and it just wasn't working for me. So in the end, I just, put it in the virtual drawer and have left it there ever since. And instead, I started working on Kiss, Marry, Murder, and I just was really enjoying writing that. And to cut a long story short, finished it many edits later, and put it out on submission, and had some really amazing feedback from people when it was on submission. Got close a couple of times with some big publishers, but they had a debut that was coming out that was too similar genre, and they couldn't take mine as well, and the timing just seemed to be wrong on a couple of things. I got an audio deal, but they needed a print partner, and we couldn't find the print partner. So in the end, last September, I just said to Davinia, how would you feel about me self-publishing this one? Because it's been a couple of years and I just really want to get it. I want to get another book out there, and I think that I can do it, and I think I can do it justice. And I learned a lot from my traditional publishing experience about just how much work the author has to put into self-promotion and supporting that publishing process. And I'd really like to give it a go. And by then I had another manuscript, a third manuscript that we were working on together that was very definitely going to be submitted to traditional editors, traditional publishing. So she said, let's withdraw it from submission, Kiss, Marry, Murder, and go for it and let's see what happens, because why not? And so that's what we've done, and that's what we agreed to. And she's still seeking deals, in terms of TV or audio rights or whatever for Kiss, Marry, Murder. So that doesn't go away from her side. But she's also got another manuscript now that's going out to traditional publishers for the book itself. And meanwhile, I've got this series that I now have the freedom to do what I want with and work to my own timing, etc., etc. So it's actually worked out really well. And if I'd have got a different agent at the beginning, who maybe I hadn't got on so well with and had such a good personal relationship with, I don't know if I would have been able to embrace this sort of hybrid career quite so comfortably or so easily. I just feel really fortunate that, she champions my work no matter how it goes out, and whether she's making money off of it or not, which is, I think, fairly rare in this world, So that's the story of my publishing journey, and it continues, doesn't it? It never.
Yes.
Unless you stop writing, it never stops. So we'll just watch this space and see what happens next. I'd like another traditional deal with the book that's on sub now. It's a one-off. It's a standalone book, and I would just really love that one to get a traditional deal. But if it didn't, for whatever reason, I think because now I've self-published one book, I'm way more comfortable about doing it again.
Yeah, I imagine so.
It was a lot of hard work, but
and I would love to. I've got some notes here that I'd love to talk about that a bit later on. At the moment, we are at the point in the episode where I pack up all your things and ask you, Faye, if I were to strand you on a desert island with absolutely nothing except a single book, which book do you hope that it would be?
Do you know, I've thought about this quite a lot. And I went back to my bookshelf, actually, to sort of look at my books and think, which book have I read the most in all my years of reading? And one book kept coming back to me over and over again. And that was a book called Tully by Paulina Simmons, which was published, decades ago, I think.
Okay.
It is an absolutely wonderful epic novel about a girl growing up on the wrong side of the tracks in America, and it follows her story across the generations. And it's a really interesting one. I think I first read it when I was a young woman. And of course, the part of the story where she's a young woman really resonated with me. But I pick it up probably once a decade, just because my life's changed and I've grown older. And it's just one of those books that's just fascinating, because when you read it as a 20-something-year-old, you take away something completely different to what you take away as a 40-something-year-old. And I just find that, like, as a writer now, which I wasn't when I first picked it up, but I just find there's something fascinating about that it can live that long in your mind. So I take that to the desert island on the basis that, I might be there quite a while, and I can look at it from a completely different perspective if I read it again. It's also really long, so it will take up quite a lot of time on the desert as well.
That's a good one. I mean, it's great. It's an amazing thing when you can find like a piece of art or something that basically grows with you, so you can keep coming back to it, and then you have, like you say, a whole new perspective on it, based just kind of almost through your own experiences and the way that you see the world has changed. So now the way that book seems to you is different. That's brilliant. Yeah. And a credit to the author. I am,
quite a lot of the books that I enjoy reading now, they're quick and funny and fast and commercial reads. And I love them for that, because that's also what I write. But there's something wonderful about a real story, an epic story. And I would count Tully as a sort of epic story.
Okay, yeah.
And one which I would be in no way brave enough to write. So
maybe one day.
So I'd also spend quite a lot of my time on the desert island just in awe and dissecting it. I'd have to probably take a pencil with me as well, so I can make notes in the margin.
Okay, yeah. That book will come back just covered in notes and scratches and tears and stuff.
Must do this, yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, coming up, I wanted to talk more about indie publishing and the kind of differences between traditional and indie, as well as a bit about Faye's writing process. That will all be available in the extended episode at patreon.com/right-and-wrong.
And that to me is a great palate cleanser. So if I wake up one morning and just feel like writing a poem, I'll do that. And it will still be me being creative and me putting words together.
Yeah.
But the pressure is not the same.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. You've just got to write something free to like kind of get out of your own head to stretch a bit. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Faye, for coming on the podcast and chatting with me. Kiss, Marry, Murder is out right now. Which shops can we get it? I know you can get it on Amazon. Where else can you get it?
You can order it, I think, from anywhere.
Okay, great.
So it's just not on bookshelves, shall we say?
Okay, right.
You can order it from any bookshop. I haven't, and across US, UK, globally, like, it's available. I've gone through Ingram as well as Amazon for distribution. So yeah, it's available wherever you want to get it from. Yeah.
Perfect. Your preferred online store. Well, thank you so much, Faye. As I said, it's been so fun chatting with you. It's been so interesting talking about the new book, your old books, everything you've been working on, all the different types of publishing. It's been great.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me.
And for anyone listening, if you want to keep up with what Faye is doing, you can follow her on Facebook at Faye Brann Writer, on Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky at Writer Faye, or on her website, faybrann.com. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do leave a like, follow on socials, and subscribe wherever you listen. And of course, if you want to listen to the extended episodes without any ads, head over to patreon.com/right-and-wrong. Thanks again, Faye. Thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode. Shout out time. One of my amazing patrons, Lee Foxton, is querying their debut novel. It's a family drama, commercial fiction along the lines of Jojo Moyes and David Nichols. Fingers crossed, I am rooting for you. Good luck.